when I was stationed at Portland Air National Guard, my job there was an airfield manager. So I would interface and work a lot with the F-15 pilots at the unit. And so there had been an airspace incursion that had taken place when I was still at the time at the Guard. And I remember kind of talking to some of the pilots about it, and I was like, what was that? And they're like, we can't really talk about it. No one really wanted to address it. And so from what I had gathered, that had been likely a UAP. And so that kind of was my perspective. Granted, I also grew up in the generation of the X-Files and, I don't know if you remember 94 Independence Day. So like for me specifically, I didn't look at it with like a crazy lens and perspective. I'm like, you never know if we're the only ones out there, essentially.
But why did you assume that if it's a top secret incursion that he couldn't talk about, that it wasn't just a military craft from another country?
Because of the way that he was discussing it.
What did he say?
So he had been, he didn't want to, from what I gather, get taken off flight status. And he's like, I really can't discuss it. We couldn't really identify it, essentially, and it had outperformed them.
So when you say that it operates outside our understanding of physics, what specifically are you saying? Like what happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have.
Energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them interdimensional beings. I think that they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have. And that's not something that I came up with on my own. That's based on stuff that we've seen. That's based on information that we've been told. And then also, too, I think that there's this historical aspect of, this gets into the deeper theories and concepts of religion and I think the history that we currently know and that kind of spins off into another topic of, you have the modern day Bible, you have this aspect of Bibles or books of the Bible that have been removed that explain and kind of touch on these topics. And I think that we're in a time and age where you have such a vast amount of information that we have access to via social media, via your cell phone, via the internet. And so it's really changing the way that we understand, the origins of life and the spiritual reality that we know.
When you
currently
say interdimensional beings, that they know that these are interdimensional beings, how do they know that?
Based on testimony would be based on witnesses that have come forward, but what I can tell you is
So the witnesses just were told that they were interdimensional?
that they've seen things. And what I can tell you without getting into classified conversations is that there have been incidences that I believe where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
That's very vague.
Yeah. So, look.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Look, have I seen a portal open? No. Have I seen a spaceship? Personally, no. Have I seen evidence of this? Yes. Have I seen photo documentation of aircraft that I believe were not made by mankind? Yes. Is there historical significance to this? Yes. Is there multiple events that go back to, I would argue, maybe even before the time of Christ that have documented this in text? Yes. So do I believe that the government has access to certain technology? Yes, to an extent. And I believe that certain contractors potentially have back engineered this tech. I think that that's what can explain the advancements that we're seeing. But I also believe that this is a dangerous level of hidden information from the American people, because if you have an aspect of the federal government, which I can tell you, I, with two other members of Congress, were denied access to information at Eglin Air Force Base pertaining to whistleblowers because of the fact, and we can get into that story and what happened at Eglin in a second, but we were denied access and told that we don't have security clearance or the read-in authority on a special access program. That's a problem because I'm supposed to represent and be an investigative body, and you have then people who are unelected that are operating basically in secrecy, and that's a problem. That's a big problem.
And so how do these people have the authority to do that?
I think it's been decades of classified secret information, then also this aspect of the intelligence community that's been empowered. And it's kind of serendipitous with timing, because when you talk about the intelligence communities and what they've done essentially to the trust in this country with the American people, I think this goes all the way back even into JFK, with how they basically have operated outside of the purview of Congress and basically to an extent have gone rogue up until recently. You're seeing a big push and pull to try to rein in these intelligence agencies currently.
Yeah. So what I want to bring it back to evidence. You said that you've seen evidence. Like, what kind of evidence have you seen?
I have seen photos. I have seen.
What have you seen photos of?
So I was in a skiff, and I can't discuss all that was in a skiff, but what I can tell you is based on the photos that I've seen, I'm very confident that there's things out there that have not been created by mankind.
It seems crazy that people have access to information that shows that there's something outside of us that is more intelligent, at least more capable than we are, and they hide it from everybody else.
What I can tell you is that when you have thousands upon thousands of people around the planet throughout time that have reported something,
right?
To say that those people are crazy, to say that, you know, the whole concept of even just asking the question that you might not necessarily be psychologically sound, that in itself, you know, that's a disinformation campaign to get people to shut up about it. And that's a problem. We know that the U.S. government has not exactly been clean, and a lot of what they've done with the American people, specifically to the topic of UFOs.
Which makes you think that it's probably because there's something there. If you think about the motivation they had with Project Blue Book, when J. Allen Hynek was running Project Blue Book, this specific intention was to discredit all stories.
And he ended up ultimately, though, after all of his investigations, becoming someone that was like, I think there's something here. But that's true. By the way, a lot of people might not necessarily go onto Google and look up that information, but you can actually look up the declassified reports from Project Blue Book. What's also interesting, though, is when we're talking about tech, right? The ability for this tech, being that it exists, to change dependence for entire governments on things like fossil fuel, et cetera. You know, it's look, I think everyone has a moral obligation to do what they think is right. Okay. And so if you're in a position of power and you see something wrong and you're not addressing it, I think, you know, this in itself, getting the truth out there for people to decide for themselves. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just telling you in our investigations and what we are pushing for in regards to transparency. I would like to see the federal government roll out some of the stuff that we've been given access to, because I think that that information belongs in the hands of the American people.